Hi, how are y'all doing? Guten Tag. Yeah, please come on in. So I'm Kyle, and thank you all for coming. I am very excited to be here and very nervous. This is my first presentation, so thank you for your patience and your kindness and understanding. Can you all hear me well? You can understand my thick, heavy American accent. It's pretty tough. It's pretty hard, I know. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I think is really important that a lot of people don't give a lot of thought to. So I'm happy to share it with you. So enjoy. First of all, I have a question. Who is not a native English speaker, but who has a lot of experience with American English, and who has not read the description of my talk? Yeah, Marilo. How many? So when an American says this sentence, how many different vowel sounds do they pronounce? Like, how many different sounds do they say? Not how many letters are written. And we're not talking about A, E, I, O, U. Like, how many sounds do they say with their mouth that are vowels? Anyone have an idea who's not native but a lot of experience with American English? Like when I pronounce this sentence in a few seconds, how many vowel sounds will you hear? One. I pronounce this, what does a fun son of the one love touch? Now let's compare the one sound to I think there are about 7 or 8 different ways that we write this one sound. It's really confusing, and these are like the most basic words of English. So you need to know how to hear and pronounce these words, but you see that the same sound gets written literally with like 8 different combinations of letters, and it makes no sense. So you can never know unless you hear it. You can never know by reading. You see how difficult it was to know before I actually pronounced it and wrote it this way. Wer kann hier Deutsch? Also, der kein Deutscher ist. Wer kann hier gut Deutsch? Also die Bananenfrage des Tages, also die Bananenfragen des Tages sind, wie viele verschiedene Laute repräsentiert der geschriebene Buchstabe R im folgenden Wort? Repräsentiert. I'll even say it for you. So in English, this question is, how many sounds does the written letter R actually represent? So like in the underlined R's in this word represent in German, repräsentiert, listen very carefully. Look at the R's and listen to me speak. Repräsentiert. How many different sounds do you hear where the R's are? Yeah, 3. But it's all written with the same letter, right? So no one who doesn't have a lot of experience with German could ever know that. How about in the next sentence, how many, I'm gonna let you think about it and not say it for you. So how many different R's how many different sounds are represented by the R in the sentence on the bottom? No native speakers. 2? Anyone else? How many? Yeah? Well, yeah, it could be 1, it could be 1. So the answer is, 3 and 2. But 7 out of 8 are not even a consonant. So you don't say der und Männer. You don't say Männer. You don't say der. You don't say Männer. You say war aber der größte der Männer. And you see that the R actually turns into an Like it's not even a consonant. It's just an just like at the end of the word repräsentiert. But in that case, you have 2 different kinds of R's. But actually, more than 60% of the written R's in German are pronounced as a consonant, not as a consonant, but as a vowel, like an which is an IPA now. I don't like it, but just know that the weird upside down A, that means like like der, va, aber, like it's this And then one last question about English. So what do all of these words have in common? No native speakers, please, but just another, same. There's something special about all of these words. What was that? Yeah, so this was my hint in case you needed it, but you're polyglot, so you didn't. Every single one of these letters is not pronounced at all. So I say critically, subtle, muscle, yacht, Wednesday, fifth, sign, herb, what, business. Literally almost every single letter in the English language, consonant and vowel, is not pronounced at all in some words. And if you do pronounce it, that's not how we pronounce, like that's not how a native speaker says the words. Obviously it varies by accent. Short disclaimer, everything I say in this presentation, all of the sounds I talk about, come from my personal dialect that you're hearing me speak right now that I learned in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'd say February.
Yeah, some people do pronounce the R for sure, but I say February. I say comfortable. Like I do these things. I say Wednesday. I don't think anyone says Wednesday.
No.
That's a confusing one because like, why do you have a silent D and an E in like a day of the week? That's annoying, right? Like that's terrible. So we could spell like this. This would be a lot easier for everyone, right? Critically, subtle, muscle, yacht, Wednesday. Like this makes a lot more sense, right? Now this already helps you pronounce English better, like more like a native speaker, because we don't write the weird silent letters. But we don't. So what you gonna do? In my beautiful American English, what are you going to do? What you gonna do? This is how we talk. I would never say. That's what I would say with my friends and family. So our problem is that we write with letters that are pronounced very, very differently or not at all when we actually talk, right? This is true for all languages, even the most phonetic, like Hungarian, which I think is the easiest language I've ever learned, and I think English is the hardest. I'm very serious, ask me later. And come to my Hungarian presentation. This is true for all languages, so Hungarian is almost perfectly phonetic, like one letter, one sound. Except the same thing happens in Hungarian, and I mispronounce something. I've been learning for 3 years, I consider myself like a decent polyglot. I pronounced something wrong in Hungarian because of how it's written. And I was so embarrassed, but like it happens to everyone, right? Like, so the word in question was Oz. So Oz is like that, but when you say I see that, you say Oszlatom, but the written Z stays. So it's written like Ozd. So I was like Ozdlatom, but it's actually harder to pronounce that, so Hungarians just don't. They just say Ost, like as if it were an S, but they don't write the S, even though it's very, very phonetic, and like same for Spanish, Portuguese, German. So when you pronounce a word exactly as it's written in any language, especially when you have the influence of your native language's spelling system and writing system, you're actually going to be mispronouncing it, right? Like if I see German and I say der man and like der bear, like that's not great German, right? Like it's not pretty. But if you don't see the written letters, if you don't know that there's a written R, if I just say der bear, you could never say dare. You could, but it would be harder for you to say dare, because the reason you say the if you're a native English speaker is because you see a written R, and when we see an R in English, we say So the problem is not that you're not talented for languages, that you can't pronounce German, that German's hard to pronounce, that you're like not a smart person. The problem is that the writing systems are dumb, not you. It's the writing systems. This is the problem. And this also causes like these classic problems like, oh, I can't understand native speakers when they speak fast. It's not just about speed. It's about all the sounds that change, that get dropped, that don't get said, the words that don't get said. The fact that what are you going to do turns into what you're going to do. There's nothing, like nada ver. There's like no relation there, you know? And there's even a problem for native speakers. So I have a buddy named Andras, or Andrew Lincoln, just like the American president Abraham Lincoln. And he was learning to spell when he was growing up in the US. He's like American Hungarian. And he was really bothered by the fact that like he was supposed to put an L in his name that you don't pronounce. Like you don't hear it. There's no L in the name Lincoln. As you can see in the band Linkin Park. This is a perfectly phonetic way to spell based on English spelling patterns. This is a perfectly phonetic way to spell the last name Lincoln. But we spell it with an O-L. Because English. So instead of trying to learn spelling rules and trying to learn pronunciation by reading words, why don't we just learn phonetic rules instead? Because these are actually perfectly consistent, perfectly regular. They happen all over the place, but they're a lot harder to learn because you have to learn them only by hearing. Most of these rules aren't even written. Like grammar books, they don't care because they're not about pronunciation. They don't care if you understand when I say what you're going to do. They just want you to know that it's not correct. But every American says it. Like almost all Americans say it. So I think it's pretty important to know, like, if you're going to hear something that native speakers always say, you should know what's going on, and you should be carefully paying attention to why it's happening. So like, why do we say whatcha? Like, why is there a ch? Like, what's that all about, right? This is what it's all about. So this is what you really should have learned in English class. All of the letters in parentheses are not pronounced and are useless and should not be written. It's not learned, it's learned. It's not schuld, it's should. It's not have, it's have. It's not what, it's what. And it's not English, it's English. So can you hear the phonetic rule? Like, what's going on when I say future and not future? procedure, not procedure. Sure, not seer. Pleasure, not plaisir. Like, what's going on here? So here are the two options. We could say future, but we don't. We say future, like a CH. We could say procedure, but we don't. We say procedure, like a J. We don't say seer, we say sure, like an SH. We don't say pleasure or plaisir, we say pleasure, like a J. Like, we don't even write that sound. You have to write it like ZH, because we literally don't write that sound. It exists in English, but you can't write it. It's very annoying. Yeah. I don't really know what that means, but I know that it's a does anyone else have any ideas? Like, I mean, definitely there's a phonetic thing going on, but I don't know phonetic terms. A what? Possibly. I don't know what it's called. All I know is that when you have a T plus, like a T plus Y, it turns into Ch. D plus Y turns into J. S plus Y is Sh, and Z plus Y is J. And this applies everywhere, absolutely everywhere. This is what's happening in whatcha. We're kind of saying what you, which is horribly wrong when you think about it, but we all say it, so it doesn't matter, because it's therefore correct, because we all say it and understand it. So future, I think it might have possibly been pronounced like future in the past, like maybe there's still like a British dialect or something that says future instead of future. It's kind of hard to say though, and I think it's called assimilation. Because like two sounds that are kind of hard to pronounce at the same time. Like it's harder to say future than future. It's harder to say procedure than procedure. It's just easier. So we do it when we speak, but we don't write it. When you say gotcha, you're actually saying got you or got ya. And it turns the T plus Y between the words. It links between words too, because it's a phonetic rule. It's perfectly consistent. You're always right, and Americans always say it. Like give me any two words. Had you seen her? Did you go? Where'd you go? We will never say, did you see her? Had you seen her? Where did you go? It's just too hard. We say, where'd you go? Did you see her? What you gonna do? Gotcha. This happens everywhere. So this is a rule that is very, very helpful for understanding and speaking English, but no one really learns or knows about. And I kind of just made it up myself, but I'm 100% sure that it's perfectly consistent in my dialect. You can overemphasize things and say, where did you go? But it sounds ridiculous. I just say, where'd you go? This is the same as, like, Brazilian Portuguese is different, very different. It sounds very different from, like, Spanish. Do we have any Brazilians in the audience? Could you pronounce this sentence for us, please? Everyone pay very careful attention to what's happening with the bolded letters. I made it easy for you. So you only have to pay attention to the letters that are big and like underlined and tilted, you know.
De nada, cara. Você tá falando fluentemente.
Cool. Can I try it? I'm going to try it. De nada, cara. Você tá falando fluentemente. How was that? Pretty good? So what's going on here? There are at least 3 very clear phonetic rules repeated at least twice or 3 times each that we can learn from this. From literally this one sentence as spoken by a Brazilian. I want you to compare it to the Spanish pronunciation, which would be like, de nada, cara, você tá falando fluentemente. Which is very different. And like the English, like, de nada, cara, você tá falando fluentemente. So these are very different, right? Like they're incomprehensible, basically. Like it's the extremes, but they're incomprehensible. Can anyone give me like one rule from here? Like what's one thing you noticed in de nada, cara, você tá falando fluentemente? Which one? They're sliced? Like, yeah, they turn into ch and? Ch and j, perfect, that's one. Uh-huh.
And the vowel sounds, they change.
Yeah, which ones? Yep, it becomes E. So you don't say de, you don't say J, you say G. That's another one. It happens with multiple letters too. You can hear it in G and you can hear it in fluentemente. And it even gets dropped sometimes. You don't say fluentemente, you say like fluentemente. But the E makes the T change into the ch or the D into the j. Very similarly to the English rule, right? I just noticed that. Literally, this is the first time I noticed that, but that's super helpful. It looks like I've made a great presentation with like a link, but I didn't. But now I did. Perfect. Is it only the E?
No, also all
Yep. Yeah, you don't say falando. You say falando. Same kind of reduction, same kind of change in vowel. Just the E and the O. De nada, cara. It becomes the same kind of, similar, not exactly the same kind of sound that you have in the German words, like the It's not an I. You don't say de nada, you say de nada, cara. It's like fala, diga. This always happens in Brazilian Portuguese, right? But very few people actually learn it because it's hard to learn. You can't. It's impossible to learn from the written words. One last rule that's kind of hidden. Você está falando fluentemente. Yes. And what happens with the N? What does the N do? So it makes it sound nasal. So it's just like in French when you say bon, you don't say bon, you don't say bonne, you don't say falando, you don't even pronounce the N. The N only serves, like you're never going to say bonbons in French. No, you say bonbon. Because the N doesn't get pronounced, it tells you that the vowel turns into a nasal vowel. The problem is so many languages write the sound N with this letter, like N with this letter. Portuguese too, but not in this case, right? So great job, you guys are great polyglots. Obviously this is the only place that this would ever happen and people would actually figure out these rules, so that's awesome. So I used IPA again. Again, don't like it a lot, but you guys said it much better than the IPA ever could. You said G and G, like you told me what the sounds are, right? Which is much better. So a great way to avoid this problem in English, so this is going to be English from now on because it's my native language, so it's the only language I can really speak to deeply. But you can see it applies to all languages, and I think this is valid and this should be much more important for all languages. So I think to learn how to speak well, you actually have to learn from our spelling mistakes. They're super helpful because there's a lot you can learn from this. The super and helpful were kind of jokes because not a lot of people do that, but you could. But the there. How many times have you seen on Facebook, like someone writes the wrong there and people just like attack them? They're like, oh my God, what an idiot. Well, how stupid. How can you mix up the three theirs? Oh wait, there are three of them, but they're all there. So they're all pronounced the same, therefore I mix them up too. Therefore Germans will mix up Zeit and Zeit, spelled with a D or a T. Like French people mix up sa and sa, spelled with like a cedilla and like an S. Because they sound the same, so we're going to make spelling mistakes because the spelling system sucks. It's terrible, especially in English, but like when you spell the same thing 3 different ways, you can never, ever, ever fault someone for picking the wrong way because the most educated and intelligent people do the same thing and then they just correct themselves. And if they ever let it get out in the email, they're like, oh my God. Like my mom sends a work email, she's like, oh my God, I used the wrong there. Oh, I'm a failure. I'm like, Mom, no, everyone does it. Everyone does it because you can't avoid it. They're spelled differently, but the sound is the same. So when you read like forums, like YouTube comments are like some of the best sources of phonetically spelled English because people don't care how they spell. If they don't pronounce a G at the end of singing, they won't write it. They'll say singin'. They'll just put an N, and that's how they talk. So now you know how they talk from writing much more than if you would use an actual course or like a professional teacher who will always say singing because they want to teach you the correct language that no one speaks. Very, very, very few people will always say singing. Americans will always say singing, how's it going? We're gonna say, how's it going? Like, it's easier, and we do it. Yeah? Yeah. I mean, when you write with the sound like in 5 different ways, of course no one's going to know when to write it E-I-N, A-I-N, I-N, U-N. Come on, what are you kidding yourself? Because the spelling systems are bad, and they are difficult for us, and they hurt our pronunciation. If you learn from perfectly spelled English, if you learn how to speak English from perfectly spelled English, you're going to be speaking very, very wrong, and very few people understand you. Because no one speaks as they write. People learn how to speak, and then we write imperfectly. And English is by far the most imperfect and by far the worst system around. So when we write slang words, like informal, not correct words like whatcha, gonna, like as you already saw, gotcha, hell of a, whatta ya, like damn it, through, light, how about you? You hear the ch. We don't say how about you. We say how about you. There's no A. Therefore, we don't write it. The abbreviation of how about you, this confuses the heck out of people who are not native speakers. They're like, the word is how about you. Why don't you write it H-A-Y? No, that's hey. Oh, sorry. But we write H-B-U for how about you because we say how about you, right? So you can learn from this, and you should learn from this. And you should never, ever, ever criticize anyone in any language for spelling something wrong when it's actually the spelling system's fault and not theirs. In ads, like that are trying to get people to laugh and be like childish, like bad spelling, this is so much better. Like this makes so much more sense, right? We say chicken, we don't say chicken. There's no E in the word chicken. This is perfectly phonetic. I mean, I would put another C, so it's not chicken, but whatever. Like this is already so much better. Girl is not girl, it's not girl, it's not gyral, it's girl. It's like an we should spell it with an ER or UR. Love is not love, it's love. This is perfectly phonetic. The U and the 4 are like the same as in U, like it's just the letter pronounced the same or the number, whatever. Crave, unnecessary change, but K and C, like there should only be one sound. It should just be like krave, like we should only have one K like Germans. Well, then they have the CK at the end. That's annoying. Never stop it, Germans. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Then you chicken for breakfast. Has anyone ever heard someone say breakfast? No, but that's how it's written, right? So this would be much easier for everyone, especially me as an English teacher. One time I was with a German buddy. A guy named Greg. He speaks awesome English. He speaks like, his English is as good as like my Portuguese maybe, or like my German. And we were driving in the US, and he sees this sign. And he's like, what does that mean, click it or ticket? I'm like, no, it's click it or ticket. It's a perfect rhyme. He goes, no, it's not. It's click it or ticket. I'm like, dude, it's my language. It's click it or ticket. He's like, that makes absolutely no sense. Why is there an E if it rhymes with it? Like, it should just be click it or ticket with an I. Just like chicken should be chicken with an I. Anyway, a lot of things should be, but they're not, so we'll stop complaining too much and try to fix it a little bit. Make it a little less bad. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, really? Like, is this normal? I'm like, yeah, like, what about chicken? He's like, it's not chicken? Like, it's not chicken? I'm like, no, it's chicken. He's like, but why is there an E in it then? If you don't say it, why do you write the E but you say an I? Yeah, English, sorry. Hardest language in the world. Believe you me. It's my language, it's the hardest. Hungarian's the easiest. So these are the most important sounds that you've never heard of, and I don't think anyone else has put together as I have, because I've just put it together from like listening to myself and other people and like all my students. So every language has these lazy or like fallback default vowels, right? So it's what you say when you don't know what to say. So in English, you're gonna go Germans are gonna go like French people are gonna go But if I say and I'm speaking perfect American English, and then I go I'm clearly not a native speaker because I don't get the most fundamental, like most unconscious sound right. These are really important to recognize and learn. They're everywhere. And of course, English doesn't just have one, it has like 5. But we're gonna pick 3. And remember, this is difficult. But remember, what does a fun son of the one love touch from the beginning? One vowel. It's this It's this like Same sound in the word because. This is not because. There's no semblance of an A. This is just because. Everybody. This is not everybody. This is not everybody. Bodhi. This is everybody. And then there's a really funny story. Guess what rhymes with funny? Honey and 20. Like I'm 21 years old. There's no T. There's no E. It's a perfect rhyme for funny and honey. This is ridiculous that we say Switzerland, American, thousand, million, human, chicken, ticket. This is not consistent. In the word consistent, there's literally one sound spelled with 3 different vowels. Consistent. I'm overdoing it a little, but I say consistent. It's one sound, and we write it 3 different ways. Like, what? Like, people know English spelling is bad. I don't think you knew English spelling was this bad. I didn't until I started teaching it. Then we have this and this sound is impossible for me to write, so I decided on EU. I was inspired by French. I was like, how should I write it? Oh, I'll just do that. So this is the sound that we have in words like before, enough, today, tomorrow, elevator, and whenever you put any word after the word to, it's no longer pronounced to, it's pronounced to. like to go, just like in today and tomorrow, but like, do you want to go to the store? You're not going to say to the store, it's just too hard. We make it easier. We're lazy. Everyone's lazy. But we have much more annoying ways to be lazy than other people. Remember when I said like childish language and like bad spelling spells things much more logically? Remember how to spell funny and honey and 20? They're only spelled logically in a children's book and in a meme of someone who's stupid. Anyway, so we have a big problem, right? This is crazy. But how can we do better? Like, how can we change things? So sure, you can learn to pronounce things before reading them, but that's impossible when you've learned the language for like 15, 20 years. You can't unsee all the stupid English words you've ever learned, right? You can't unsee them. However, that is how every baby ever learned to speak their native language perfectly. No one ever sat down with an infant and gave them a book and said, like, read these sounds. They just heard them a million times and they repeated them, right? This is the idea behind the mimic method, which is a cool site, which teaches you to speak and not grammar or vocabulary. So, but we could also, as a lifetime polyglot crazy person, we could also try to like make our own spelling system, right? But that's not what's the most important here. Like, the sounds are the most important. So the spelling system only helps people who are crazy like us. So with my best students, I was like, how can I spell English better so that they don't say off instead of, because it's spelled OF, but it's actually pronounced of, like UV. Strange. But anyway, so, and this is also for me, I'm like, oh, this would be cool if English were spelled better. Maybe I can be the one to make it, but it'll never be accepted. I don't have any like Esperanto type delusions. Like, no one will ever accept this. The whole world will never speak Esperanto. I'm sorry, it would be cool, but they won't. No one will ever spell like this. But it's interesting for me, and it's helpful for my like best students, right? And my principles behind this were that I'm gonna base it on spelling patterns that exist already and only create new ones when necessary. So you'll see that here, I created only the The already exists, like when someone says you write it UH, so I just took that. The I took the same principle, and I'm like, if I write an I, it'll be I, but if I put an H, it'll kind of be like and it'll be But then the like, where do I start? Does anyone have a better idea for that? Please let me know afterwards. I'm very sincere. I need your help, because this is impossible. I'm not going to use any IPA or special characters, because they make people scared, because they're just Greek. They're literal like Greek symbols, and they're terrifying, and they don't really help anyone. Like normal people, polyglots, sure, but like my students, right? Like these are just normal people trying to learn a language. The IPA just scares them, just like any like calculus formula, right? And then you can type it anywhere, like in Skype, for example, where I teach. And you only emphasize mispronounced parts of words. So in this example, even though I don't like the PH, and I think it should just be spelled F always, if my student doesn't have a problem pronouncing the PH as F, I'm not going to make it an F. That will just confuse them more. But I am going to change, if they said emphasize, I'm going to change the A into an because that's what it should be, and the S into a Z, because it's emphasize or emphasize. The lazy vowels, you can kind of like, they mesh and they mold. We also have some really special consonants in English. So no American knows that like if they claim they can't pronounce the R in the word like pero in Spanish, or like Magyar in Hungarian, they're wrong, because they say it every day whenever they say the word better, butter, buddy, 80, or body. So this is literally the same sound, right? We just spell it with two T's and we tap it, and so I chose, it's not perfect, but I chose to use an R to represent this, because I know people learning English are never going to see unless they're really good, they're never going to see an R and say r, but if they're Spanish, they're going to say r. If they're Portuguese, they might say h or like r. If they're German, they might say r or like whatever. So I just chose to use this, it's called the Spanish R, because Spanish is like relatively well known, and you're like, at least if you're an American, like you know that like pero, it like should be pronounced somehow. Maybe you don't know how to pronounce it, but actually you do. You can say the r, because we say it all the time. Then there are these, I'm going to use one phonetic term. They're called unaspirated, like K, T, and P sounds. I think that term is utterly useless for everyone, because what does it tell you? It tells you nothing. What I can tell you is that when Jimi Hendrix sang the words, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky," Americans were really confused. They're like, what guy is he talking about kissing? Like, why is Jimi Hendrix going to kiss a guy? But actually he was saying kiss the sky, but they sound identical. Kiss the sky, kiss the sky. Because they turn into the same sound, because S plus a K turns into kind of like a G. It's called unaspirated K. I'm going to call it a G, because that's what it sounds like to me. So it should be pronounced sky and skin, not sky and skin. This is really difficult for people who aren't native speakers. because it's so hard, because it's in between like a G and a K. But I think if you say sky and skin, if you pronounce it like a real hard G, it's better. It sounds better to me. It sounds more like native English speakers speak. Same as in the words stop and store. We don't say stop and store. We say stop and store. So it sounds more like a D. I realized this when I was like 6, reading the word spot in this book, like Spot Runs. It's like this little dog book for kids in English. And I'm like, Mom, why are you saying spot with a B? She's like, no, it's a P. That's just how you say it. It's like, it's spot. It's a P though. I'm like, no, it's a B. You're saying spot. And I was kind of wrong, and she was kind of wrong, because this is hard. Like, it's in between the two. But whatever. Just try to pronounce it as a B. Everyone try to say sky and skin. No k, sky. Just say SG, sky, skin. And then store, stop. How about spot, spin? You might have noticed in my word spot, there's no T. I don't say spot. I don't say spot. That's not American, that's not me. I say spot. What's happening at the end? No one really knows. I don't really know. I just know that I kind of just like go and I just like cut it off. I can't really teach this. Like, this is pretty unteachable, right? Like, how do you teach Like, can anyone say like hot, like stop, like what, but? How about written? I don't say written, I say written, button, mountain. Kind of horrible, I guess, but like that's how we talk, right? Like, we're going to the mountains. Like, there's no T. We don't say mountain, we say mountain. It's ridiculous. It's utterly absurd, but we say it. So it exists, and a lot of people say it. I just write this with a comma, or an apostrophe rather, because I don't think it deserves a letter, because it's not really a sound. It's kind of just like a stop. So here's some examples of like how I would spell things to help my students, how I do spell things. These are pulled from like real lessons, except the last one. That's just a joke. Because when you see an X in English, there are actually 2 ways to pronounce it. You can say x or you can say gz. And of course, since it's English, you can never know which one it is. There is no rule. There's not even a phonetic rule. You just have to learn it, because fuck you, it's English. So you have to say exception. You can't say exception. You sound absurd. But you can't say example. You have to say example. You can't say experience. You have to say experience, but it kind of turns into that like B that we just saw, right? So it's not experience, but it's experience. But it's not existence, it's exist.
There is a rule for this. The rule is whether or not it's followed by a consonant.
But,
Experience.
Thank you.
The vowels exist.
Thank you. Finally, someone teaches me the rule. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God there's actually a rule here, because I was like killing myself. I'm like, what's the rule? What's the rule? There isn't a rule. Thank you. Talk to this man. He knows his stuff. Yeah, so there's a vowel after, so it's ixe, but oh no, never mind, because the K, no, unfortunately not, because, yeah, that's my point, because the KS is the X, and the GZ is the X, and so there is a vowel on either side. Ixe, igze. You see, like, both are surrounded by 2 vowels. Mm-hmm. No, but the C isn't pronounced. The C, it's just a x sound. You don't say exception. But you don't say exception. But experience. You mean if it's followed by a written consonant? I would doubt that, because it's not phonetic and there are no written rules in English. But I hope you're right. But I don't think, I'm not hopeful, because it's English. But I hope you're right. The exercise, exertion, interesting. I hope you're right. I so hope you're right, dude. That would be so cool. Then the words of, love, glove, and above that we saw before, love. I mean, I always felt like this, it kind of gets weird in looking. So sometimes you're like, what the fuck? This is really like, it's not an ideal system, but it's definitely like for my students who are actually serious polyglots like us, it was really helpful to hear this and to see this, because like, this is something they could never learn anywhere, right? Like, does anyone know of anything like this that's used or thought about or like tried or put into practice, like actually trying to help people pronounce things better and like spell things less stupidly in English? I haven't heard of it, so I tried to create it. There are some challenges here, obviously. Like, so a lot of the sounds in English are simply never, ever, ever written consistently, or not at all, like the pleasure. Like, you can't write a je in English. You just can't. Like, how do you spell je in English? You can't. All you can do is give me the example of the word pleasure and treasure. That's all I could do for you. So I was like, okay, I'll just take the ZH from like the Chinese transcriptions, maybe? That might work, because it's kind of like an SH is sh, so ZH should be je. Like, that's pretty logical. But like, how do you write the sound in the words wood and good, this as opposed to food? Because they're not the same sound. You don't say good food, and you don't say good food. You say good food. Two different sounds, right? Good food, oo. But if I try to find the spelling pattern in English, there is one. It's O-U-L. Because if you write would, could, or should, the L's are silent again, and it's the sound But if you take out the letters around it, if you take out the W and the D, you'll pronounce it like owl. And even if you take out the L, you'll pronounce it like ow. So like, how am I supposed to write this sound, right? Like, I'm genuinely begging for your help, because this is impossible. Or I might just give up and be like, look, you guys just need to learn sounds instead of writing, which is kind of what I say. But I also need to help people learn, right? So this is really tricky. There's also a kind of hidden sound in English that no one ever thinks about, linked to the We don't say, like, there's two different, when you see like I-K-E or like I-V-E, there's a pronunciation pattern, right? You say like live, or like lies, or like I, like this I. It's like an I, it's a diphthong, right? It's a two sound, yeah. But there's also an I. We don't say, I like that. Wow, do you want to be my wife? No, we say, I like that. Do you want to be my wife? It's an I, it's not I. It changes. You say life, but lives. Wife, but wives. So it's this I. This has a cool rule, but if you actually care, you can ask me later. And then how do you write the two different TH sounds? Like, Jesus Christ. There are two THs. You have th and you have the. Very different sounds. If you say this and that, it's not great. If you say like thin and like, it just doesn't sound great. So I think we should bring back the and th letters from like Icelandic, because they existed in Old English and they're beautiful and they work perfectly. But no one would ever accept new letters, right? So I need help. And then this stupid non-serif fonts, like all I want to do is write L and then a capital I, and that's what it looks like. They're not the same letter. Stop doing this to me, bad fonts. So just to wrap up, sorry this went a little long. I hope it was enjoyable and interesting. So yeah, in all languages, as we've seen, especially English, as we've seen way too much, and as you experience way too much, everyone who's not a native speaker, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad. Hardest language in the world to learn. I'm really lucky that I learned it as my native language. We pronounce things totally differently, totally and utterly differently than they're written. So if you read the words first, even if you pay really careful attention to hearing, it's hard to ignore a written L, right? Like it's hard to like see a written L and not say like Lincoln, because that doesn't make any sense. It's so hard to do that when you see the written word and when you know how it's spelled. So we could try to spell things more phonetically, like I have, just spelling not create like a whole new alphabet or spelling system or try to impose it on anyone, just like the most common and confusing mistakes, like some of which I've just showed. And this is cool because it can help anyone at any level, not just crazy polyglots like us, but I've used this to help my friends who is like a mere mortal. And I just, instead of writing psychology, I write psychology without a CH and without a P because they're not pronounced. So I don't write them for her, and she's like, "You're serious? You don't pronounce the P? But why do you write the P?" I'm like, "Yeah, English. Sorry, I have nothing for you. I'm so sorry." So I just want to leave you with the hope that we can learn to listen more carefully and better train our actual ears and our mouths to hear and pronounce and speak with people in the languages we're learning. Thank you.
So the first question is, what about the danger of learning too extreme of slangy pronunciation?
Too extreme of slang and pronunciation? I don't think that exists, because if you say the slang with good pronunciation, you'll make all natives laugh and love you. Because you can't use too much slang. The only thing you can do wrong is only learn slang. So you can't learn too much, but if you learn only slang, if you only learn how to speak like what you're gonna do and you don't understand the full version, that's fine, but I would rather you know the short version and be able to speak with me and say, "Yo, Kyle, what you gonna do tonight?" than only know how to say, "Hello, Kyle, what are you going to do later this evening?"
Do you think that the drifting of English pronunciation from the spelling is going to continue in the future? Are we not going to get two separate languages?
Interesting. I hope that this trend reverses and we start spelling things more wrong, and that actually gets accepted more, because with the internet, everyone can write whatever they want. Like no one cares how you write with your friend. Well, people say, they're like, oh my God, your texts, oh Kyle, your texts are horrible. Your language, how can you write like that? I'm like, Mom, we all understand each other. What's the problem? Like, my mom doesn't say that, but like people do say that. So I hope that this actually, because English doesn't have an academy imposing like bad rules on it, which also kind of maybe hurt our spelling, but I think every language hurts its own spelling. Like French pronunciation changes and the academy can't control that, right? But they control the spelling. And so they have their own problem, but French is not as bad as English. So I really hope that because English is kind of flexible with that, and like we do kind of accept new spellings and new words and new usages, I hope that like gotcha will in the future be accepted and like not as discriminated against. I hope that's the way we go.
Is there any sense in learning rules of reading in English? Isn't it easier just to listen and speak a lot and grasp them from use?
Yes, it's much easier, and it's how I learn languages, and it's what I think you should do. Just like you learned your native language, you learned to speak, you heard, you imitated, you learned to speak, you learned to have conversations. Only afterwards did you learn to read. And for English speakers, it was really hard to learn to read, because even if we can speak perfectly, this is confusing, like Lincoln, like this is confusing for us, right? This is confusing for everyone. So we have to spend a lot more time and energy learning how to read and pronounce our language. But we never, ever, no native English speaker has ever learned to read before speaking, right? So I don't think anyone should necessarily, if your goal is to speak with people and to travel and to like live and work in the country, I think you should always learn to speak first, and then learn to read what you already say in here, and write what you already say in here, in that order.
Don't you think it's critical to legitimize international wrong deviations from rules?
Legitimize wrong deviations from rules. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should have the freedom and the opportunity to change whatever they want in the language. But to do that successfully, you need to have a good command of the language that it's spoken, because if you create your own rule and you create a new word or something, or like a combination of words that I don't understand in English, like, sure, like, cool, it's just a bummer that I didn't understand, right? Like, I want, like, my goal in learning is to get to that point and to be able to intentionally break rules and intentionally put together new words and like make jokes about words and like say things wrong to make people laugh, like to make a joke, you know, intentionally. But that needs like a pretty good level already in the spoken and understood language.
What do you think of Mark Twain's famous plan for the improvement of English spelling?
I only know that kind of like, what did he say exactly? Oh, he basically said we should spell like German, but German has the same problems. So if we spelled like Germans, like we would just be spelling. I mean, I love him for doing that. I think he's right in that we should change English spelling, but unfortunately you can't just change the spelling. Like, just like no language academy can impose how people talk, no one can impose how people write. Even if my system's perfect and you're all like, oh my God, everyone should write like that, no one will write like that because you can't make them. Oh yeah, try it in English. Who will change? I mean, and I don't even always agree with the spelling reforms. I think they make things more complicated a lot of the time. And like, who decides? Like, I love when they make things easier, but they don't always, you know? Thank you. And just a final, if you guys are interested, how many different sounds are, this is just your final exam, so now that you've all learned how to hear and things really nicely, how many different sounds are written with the letter T in this sentence when I say, 90 is totally righteous, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously the answer is all of them are different. There are 5. 90, it's a D. At least there's one real T in the beginning of the word totally, but then comes the like tapped, totally, and then we say righteous, it turns into the ch, and we don't pronounce it at the end, we say right.
The only caveat is, I would totally disagree with that. It's the D in the first letter is the same as the second, sorry, the T in 90 is the same as the T in totally.
It's not. That's why the first one is a D and the second one is a R, like in butter, and like pero in Spanish. They're different. But you think they're the same?
90, totally.
I say 90 and totally. It's a subtle difference. It's the difference between D and R. It's the difference between putting your tongue there and letting it down, and starting it down and then just tapping the top. 90, totally. It's the difference between, it's because of the N that comes before it. So when your tongue is already in the N position, it makes a D sound by cut. It's a very subtle difference, but it's a phonetic difference that I could write with the IPA in the way I speak. I had to search really far and wide though to find a word where I actually say a D when a T is written, because it's really hard. Because I needed the N before it for my tongue to be in the D position for it to be a real D and not the R.
Like when you gave the you said example, and you wrote it as an I-G, I would say it's really an S. I don't say example, I say example.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't speak for anyone but myself, and I say example.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't like how I talk, but it's how I talk. It's my native language. Thank you. Yeah, please.
I had one.
Thank you.
I just had a recent experience with a Greek colleague who speaks great English, but he would say 1-4 and 4-0 because he didn't want to say 40 and 14.
Yeah, because the difference.
Replace the T with the D and you'll be understood.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. People are like 40 and 14. I'm like, I hear it opposite because the way Americans distinguish between the teens and the Ds, let's call them, are if we hear a T, it's a teen. If we hear a D, it's a D. But that's really hard when we write them all with T's.
Right.
Therefore,
It instantly worked for him and he was able to communicate and I would understand that.
For sure. But it's not what we do and it's not how we distinguish. But it's really funny how they actually get reversed. People will say like 14 or like 14 and 4T. And I hear it reversed because it's exactly the opposite of what we do.